That's exactly. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the open meeting for Thursday, August 10th, 2023, and ask the Commission Secretary for information on today's agenda.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the minutes of the open meeting of Thursday, August 3rd, 2023, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the minutes.
I move we approve the minutes of Thursday, August 3rd.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the agenda, and each has informed me there is no need to discuss the notices associated with agenda items 2 and 3.
Move we approve the notices of proceeding associated with agenda items 2 and 3.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that brings us to agenda item 4, which is docket 6690-CC-239776. And my understanding is that one of my colleagues wishes to discuss this item, and so I will leave it to whomever wanted to discuss it.
That was me.
Okay?
Yep, so this is a consumer complaint. Mr. Kott was signed up to receive natural gas service at his home, or a home that he owned, at the address of 7306. And his business or himself owned a building at 7310. It was part of a expansion plan, an AEP. And so both the home and the business were assessed fees or charges related to that. There was a charge of $416.53 for a one-time prepayment, and then for the home, the charge was $21.86 per month. For the business, it was $195.36. Mr. Kott is disputing that he signed up for service for the AEP for his business building at 7310. The concern that I had was that in the confidential file, the back and forth between Mr. Kott, the utility, and our staff, there was a signed document for the home, 7306. But the document that was provided, and our staff did ask for signed copies of the document for both 7306 and 7310, but the document for 7310 is actually not signed. It's a template for that address, but neither Mr. Kott nor the utility has actually signed that document. So I wasn't sure if there's another copy of that, but I thought it was worthy of finding out, because he is obviously adamant that he didn't sign up, and the utility is sure that he did. Usually a signed contract closes the case. We don't have that yet. And so I would have opened the request to see if we could dig that up.
And so the reason I was going to deny the complaint is because his heating contractor had requested that dual meter bar be installed, which to me indicates a readiness to have the service run to both addresses.
Mm-hmm.
And so my reading of all of the documentation, and staff looked at it not once but twice.
Mm-hmm.
And so my reading of it was that it was proper to deny it.
Yeah.
I was at deny as well for similar reasons. We also had a robust conversation with our consumer affairs staff and feel very strongly that it's run its course. He implicitly or explicitly was under contract, and therefore that was an alternative too.
Okay.
All right. So Commissioner Strand, do you want to make the motion?
So for item number 4, I move alternative 2.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Okay. That moves us to agenda item 5, which is an intervenor compensation request filed by Clean Wisconsin to participate in Wisconsin Power and Light's natural gas and electric rate case. They submitted an intervenor compensation request seeking $75,760 to participate. Specifically, they would hire a consultant that they've used before, Synapse, to look at the net metering changes that are being proposed in that case. And for this one in particular, and I guess right now I'll just take a minute to talk in general about the status of the intervenor compensation fund and the fact that we have a number of new participants in these proceedings. So we are only allocated a finite amount of dollars for the intervenor compensation fund, and those dollars have to last the biennium. So we're allocated $1 million over 2 years, which is $500,000 a year. If we have remaining funds at the end of the first year of the biennium, those dollars flow through to the next year. We, over the last 4.5 years, have been extraordinarily deliberate about doing more outreach to groups and organizations who are interested in our decisions, but who haven't necessarily participated in the development of the record for those proceedings. And I've been pretty vocal about the importance of our work being transparent and that we are making sure that there are additional parties, that there are additional points of view brought into these cases. Because I think that the more fulsome record we have and the more diversity of thought and suggestions that are brought to bear, at the end of the day, our decisions are then that much better. That being said, we don't have an unlimited budget. So it's really important, and we talked about this last week, it's really important that we understand the entire bucket of dollars that we're looking at and the fact that we're not done with all of our cases for the biennium, right? I mean, we know that there's a queue of cases that we haven't yet received intervenor comp from, and that in fact that parties haven't yet even had the opportunity to intervene in. So I think it's important that we keep that in mind as we look at these intervenor compensation requests. That being said, there are some novel positions that are being proposed to bring into the rate cases this year. As an aside, we also have all 5 IOUs in for rate cases, which also puts a strain in order to ensure that everybody is able to participate in those cases. So it's a little bit of a perfect storm that we've seen as it relates to intervenor comp. I think it's a good problem to have. I mean, I think it's great. I actually welcome the fact that we are seeing intervenors want to participate in such a meaningful way that we haven't seen before. But that's a really long way of me saying we only have so many dollars. And so as we go through these intervenor comp requests, we have to keep in mind the big picture. And that is that we have to be diligent about how we allow the intervenor comp dollars to be used. Some of these intervenors are short on detail. This particular case, Clean Wisconsin, it was not short on detail, but we'll talk about the details that are necessary in the next couple of dockets. So for this one in particular, I was comfortable approving Clean Wisconsin at the amount that they requested, the full amount of $75,760. I think the analysis that they are planning to put into the record is really important for the underlying case. And unlike last week, I think it was last week, I didn't find it to be duplicative. And for me, that's a big factor. So for this particular request, I'm at alternative 1. I would fully fund Clean Wisconsin's request. Commissioner Huebner.
Yeah, I'm at the exact same spot. I think you said it very well. I've got my spreadsheet open of that our legal counsel has developed of all the pending, and we're kind of looking at that, and we'll talk about some of the other ones, but we want to reserve some funds for cases not yet filed. This particular one, you know, the attorney fees are quite reasonable, and the specific analysis that is proposed is highly technical, and it's not something that, you know, this particular intervener has on staff and that you wouldn't necessarily expect them to. So I was at the same spot.
Okay.
So I was at alternative 1.
All right. Commissioner Strand.
I'm also at alternative 1 for this one specifically, and I share the thoughts expressed about the importance of interveners and the concerns about the funds for this biennium. So,
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
thank you.
All right, for docket 1, IC 547, I move that we fully fund the applicant's IC request in the amount of $75,760.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now we move to agenda item 6, which is another intervenor comp request from Blacks for Political and Social Action of Dane County for their participation in the MG&E rate case. And so they filed 2. The first one we'll take up relates to their participation in the MG&E rate case. Again, they are looking through a lens of environmental justice and racial equity in particular. They're looking at the impact that the changes to net metering and other changes in rates would have, particularly on low to middle income communities. And I think, again, this is a very important topic. But when I read their proposal in conjunction with, for example, Clean Wisconsin, to look at similar issues, I think that there needs to be more coordination, especially as it relates to the rate impact on low to moderate income communities and the net metering in particular, that impact on low to middle income communities. And so I was prepared to grant some, but not all, of their request. I thought the legal fees were actually a little bit high in both of their requests, and I'm not sure if that's because they are newer, and so they will rely on the sort of technical and procedural expertise of the lawyers that they're going to have represent them in the case. But I thought that the requested amount of over $100,000, especially given the finite amount of money that we have, was a little high. So I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on this one in particular. So I welcome the intervention. I think it's appropriate. They meet the statutory and the admin code requirements for receiving the funding. The request was a little too high, and I would trim it down.
Yep. Yeah, I was in the same boat, and I didn't have I did not go in and sort of identify certain hours to reduce. My approach was really just gonna be to fund 75% of the request. So I'm open to other more scalpel-based approaches here. But for me, too, it was not the witness. And in particular, I think this is the same witness we saw last year, and the testimony that the witness produced was voluminous and extremely enlightening. But just the legal fees, especially when you're running these concurrent rate case, I'm hoping that the law firm, being the same law firm running 2 cases at the same time on mostly the same issues, that there's some synergies there that we can kind of reduce the legal budget at this stage, and hope that they're able to find some synergies to accomplish that. So that would be, I would throw out funding it at 75%, which would be about $79,600
Okay.
for this one.
All right. Commissioner Strand?
Yes, thank you. I agree with most of the comments that were made. I also would prefer to partially fund this, but I didn't really have a great methodology for getting to that number. I agree that the legal fees do seem high, and that I'm similar to what Commissioner Huebner said. I think there are probably places for not just synergy, but also coordination between a lot of these interveners on this when they're looking at the same issues within these cases. I also, probably not this one specifically, but I also think that some of these organizations, legal fees are the kinds of things that they're able to fundraise for and get and have, kind of get their donors excited about, which would also then help us with the stresses that the IC Comp Fund is feeling. But I would be comfortable with, like I said, a partial funding of this, anywhere between 50 to 75% is fine with me.
I'm just looking at the kind of overall bucket of dollars. That's at the 70. And Commissioner Strand, you said you're comfortable between 50 and 75%?
Yes.
Okay. I was closer to 50%.
Okay.
So I would feel comfortable funding them at 50% of their request. And again, they can come back, right? I mean, if that's a problem and the lawyers say there's absolutely no way we can do that, they can file additional information, supplemental information. I'm looking at Jenna.
They typically can, but it's really reserved for circumstances when they couldn't anticipate the costs.
Okay.
So it's really not a two bites at the apple.
Okay.
It's really for, like, for example, last year when there was a change in the scope of the proceedings that the law firm didn't anticipate, there were additional legal fees, and they were able to come in and were awarded supplemental. While you're thinking about that, in terms of the funding, just some further direction, whether you just want to give them a lump sum and leave it to them to submit revised both legal and technical, whether you want the 50% taken off just the legal. Either way, depending on what you decide, they will need to submit supplemental work plans so that we have a way of tracking the work. But however you wish to, you can do it either way. Just say, we're going to give you X dollars, talk with your law firm, talk with your experts, come up with revised work plans for both, or specify where you want to see the portion of the cuts or all of the cuts taken.
I mean, I would prefer that we give them the dollars and say, now you have to figure out how to make this work. Rather than us sit here and say, you know, cut Mr. Colton's plan by 50%, right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Are you comfortable with that?
50%?
Yeah.
I guess, I'm concerned that it might be too much, that the attorneys, I mean, the way that this particular applicant has, it's a market rate attorney, they don't have an in-house, and so,
Yeah, they have two lawyers.
right. I figured there was some synergy, I wasn't sure, I guess I wasn't sure if there's that much synergy between the two cases, especially depending on how the cases progress, they could diverge, so. But if you guys are both comfortable with 50%,
I think that's better.
then that's okay.
I'm good with 50%.
Me too.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Commissioner,
You want me to make the motion, or
Yeah.
Tyler, do you want to do it? You good?
I need a second,
Okay,
sorry.
that's fine.
again, something you could consider if there is a concern of the dollars, you could lay it over and have them go look at, saying, this is what we think. You know, we're not going to fund it fully. Come back to us with something. Or, you know, you could hold over and say, you know, not supplemental, but, you know, justify additional dollars.
Yeah.
But, you know, from a intervener standpoint, they sort of like to know upfront what the budget they have to work with, as
Right.
opposed to a promise of potentially, for that same scope, getting more money later.
Right. So I won't bury the lead, and I'll tell you that when I look then at their request for Power and Light's case, I'm at a similar place. And when I look at the interveners in general that are in the Power and Light case, I think that they need to sharpen their pencils. And I'm fine with laying both of them over, and after hearing our message that it would be imprudent for us to fulfill requests sitting here in August, knowing we have a number of large cases right around the corner. And some people might think, well, first in, first out, it's first come, first served. That's not, sorry. Some people might think it's first come, first served. That's not the way it works. We have to take a holistic view of all of the cases and the cases that are in front of us. And so I would be comfortable laying them both over because I'm in exactly the same spot for their request. I was prepared to partially fund it, but not at the $113,000 level. I think the legal fees are too high in both instances.
Yep, I agree.
I don't have an issue with the expert dollar amount, but I think the legal fees are too high. So I'm comfortable holding it over or laying it over so that they can make revisions and we're not inadvertently, putting them in a harder spot than
Yeah,
anticipated.
okay. Does that work with the timing of the cases and getting testimony started?
The testimony for MG&E is obviously coming up.
Yeah.
So the sooner the better for everybody. So I would give them a specific deadline by which to file revised work plans so that we can quickly just bring those revisions back to you, potentially even as early as next week. So that you can finish your deliberations and we can have some certainty for all of the parties then they can turn their attention to getting the testimony and the work done.
Yeah, okay. I think if they have something back to us by, Monday? And then we can take it up at next week's open meeting.
And we'll communicate, in the event the parties aren't listening, we'll send out an email to just make that request of the supplemental filings by end of day on Monday.
Okay. Okay.
I'm comfortable with that.
Commissioner Strand?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, so then we moved, now we move directly to agenda item 8, which is docket 1-IC-552. This is, again, in MG&E's rate case, a new intervener, which is 350 Wisconsin. And they, again, are going to be examining the impacts of home energy costs on housing affordability and the health and well-being of families, focusing on lower-income renters and homeowners. And again, from a statutory perspective, I do think that they represent a significant position that we wouldn't otherwise see on the record. However, this particular request and their request in the Power and Light case lack some required detail. So specifically, there is no detail provided as to the number of hours, the hourly rate, or specific tasks that their non-staff member would provide. It was just very generally referred to as testimony preparation. So I would like to see this information and a more detailed work plan. So I was okay with the dollar amount. I just want to see more specifically what's the work plan? Where are those dollars going? I didn't have consternation about the dollar amount itself. So I was prepared to fully fund them, which is alternative 1, and then include subalternative A, which would make the award of those funds contingent on the applicant submitting further information. So I'm at alt 1 and subalt A.
I'm in the same spot. Yep, I think it's an important issue. It's a new group, and their costs and legal fees were certainly reasonable, but I agree with the sub-alt A to get the additional details.
Okay.
I'm in the same spot as well, and I think this is a good learning experience for them for,
Yeah.
hopefully for the future,
Yeah.
for what we're looking for next time.
Yep, agreed. Yep.
Okay, so for docket 1 IC 552, I move that we fully fund the applicant's IC request for $18,248 and make the award of funds contingent upon the applicant submitting further information on the hourly rates of applicant staff and a work plan for its non-staff member.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the next agenda item is agenda item 9, which is 1-IC-553. Again, same intervener, same requested amount, different case. This is for the power and light case. I'm at the same exact spot, so I'm at Alt 1, Sub Alt A.
Me too.
Okay,
Me three.
all right.
And just confirming that sub-alternative, that would just be subject, if staff sees some issues, they'll elevate it, but otherwise, it's really just more of a compliance filing.
Agreed.
Yep.
Okay, great. In docket 1 IC 553, I move we fully fund the applicant's request for $18,248, consistent with our discussion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that brings us to agenda item 10, which is docket 6680-FR-2022. And Commissioner Hebner very valiantly volunteered for this one.
Thank you, Chair.
I was going to say drew the short straw,
No.
but that's not true.
I don't think so. This is a request from Wisconsin Power and Light for the reconciliation of actual 2022 fuel costs with the projections contained in their 2022 fuel cost plan, which has been approved by the commission. In docket 6680 UR 123, the commission approved a fuel cost plan for the applicant for 2022 in the amount of $262,580,245. That's for Wisconsin retail customers. WPL's actual fuel cost for 2022 was $389,125,207 on a Wisconsin retail basis. As a result of the increased cost of fuel on a dollar per megawatt hour basis, the applicant charged its retail customers approximately $122 million less than the fuel cost it incurred to serve them. The applicant will absorb approximately $5.3 million of this difference, consistent with the 2% fuel cost tolerance. But that does leave a deferred accounts balance debit of $116.8 million. To manage the impact on customers of that debit, of that amount owed, the applicant proposes a 27-month recovery period that would start October of this year, go through all of 2024 and all of 2025. The major drivers of this particular $116.8 million were coal delivery limitations, primarily to Columbia Power Plant. The applicant estimated about $35 million related to that. Unanticipated outages at 2 natural gas plants, both Riverside and West Riverside, and the estimate for that was about $50 million. The fuel cost increased, and the natural gas increased, and we're well aware of both of those. That was about $50 million. And then the applicant had higher than forecasted load for an estimated $15 million. Staff also discussed congestion. There was a certain amount of congestion forecast, but the congestion was higher than anticipated as well. However, the applicant did receive $17 million in financial transmission rights that partially offset that. Other things that offset it, the hedging and the fuel, the risk management, estimated to reduce the overall amount by about $40 million. Capacity revenue was about $10 million higher than forecasted. And because of actions taken related to Columbia, about $15 million of extra coal and energy value was received from the second railroad, ultimately serving coal to that power plant. And then they also were able to increase the train sets, or increase the number of cars and get more coal per round trip, and that they estimated saved about $5 million. We are called here today to ensure that that deferred account balance debit is accurate and includes only prudently expended fuel costs. And if it does, we shall authorize the utility recover that in rates. when we look at things, when we look at prudency, it is our job to look at the moment that the decisions were made and not looking today backwards at could-haves or should-haves, but instead look in the moment. And I obviously am greatly looking forward to my colleagues' analysis of this as well. But I appreciated all the briefs and the legal arguments, but as you know, I am a numbers person, so I found my joy in staff's witness Klaus Mylata Exhibit 4. And I'm going to walk through that, but I do want to first thank the interveners and our staff, and in particular, Klaus Mylata and Mark Ruskevich on this. In particular at the hearing, I thought they both did an excellent job of providing information for the record and asking questions that would illuminate the questions that had been raised and not yet answered by the time we got to hearing. So I thank you. I think you guys did a great job. I think we have a relatively full record. I think there's places that I would have liked to see more, and maybe our lessons learned for staff and interveners going forward, but for those following along and with access to all these wonderful documents in our record, Mylata 4 in particular on page 4, the thing that disturbed me the most about the case was really the big issue was whether or not the annual volume obligation was imprudent, that they didn't provide that in writing. And so we are called to look at whether that had a material impact. I found that they, in January, were sending emails referencing updated and latest and greatest. That tells me that numbers had been provided before early January. And again, kind of looking at the numbers, on page 4, the second chart at the bottom shows how we got to 116,784,000. So in January, that deferred balance was 0. In February, that deferred balance remained 0, but the coal shortage was being identified. The amount of coal coming to Columbia was starting to decrease. In March, the balance was still 0, and in April is the first time that we see that this company was behind. And it's in April and really early May that the company's emails provided in the record confidentially. Some of it the public can read, and other parts of it are redacted, but that is where you see the temperature start to increase. You see requests to have our executive vice presidents, alliance vice presidents, talk to the railroad's vice presidents. You see the issue being elevated because energy prices are really high. There's a great opportunity for margin, as they talked about, and that means benefit to customers. And by May, because the coal shortfall primarily, the balance had increased to 29 million. By June, an agreement was struck where essentially a competitor railroad would be allowed to deliver coal. And you see that in June and July and August, the balances do increase, but not as precipitously. Then, unfortunately, issues occurred late in the year at both West Riverside and Riverside. Different issues. I felt that, in particular, I want to get his name correct here, Mr. Hansen really did an excellent job at the hearing and in his testimony describing the punch list, the procedures, kind of what happened, why, who's responsible. It was a very unfortunate year. I think that was maybe the word used. It was a challenging year. It certainly is not fun to be here with this level of fuel under collection. And I'm looking forward to both of your thoughts, but I saw a series of unfortunate events. And I saw a series of unfortunate events that unfortunately coincided with a year where energy costs were just very high. Natural gas prices were high. There's a lot of global things driving that. The railroad issues were well documented with third-party, news releases, third-party analysis, the National Transportation Surface Board calling special meetings, requiring weekly. I mean, that's very clear that there was underperformance at the railroad. It culminated, I don't know if that's in the record because I think it happened this year, but in a near strike that had to be averted by the President of the United States. Major issues that unfortunately compounded. The other thing that was really unfortunate, this particular applicant had negotiated an excellent price for their coal delivery to Columbia. But because of that, in a weird twist, that railroad, when they were short on trains and short on workers, was delivering coal to the places where that railroad could in fact make the most money. So when you look at, should they have executed a railroad contract with a higher value, we would say absolutely not. No, you should negotiate the best railroad contract for your customers that you can. That was another piece of the unfortunate events. So it left me, and I appreciate Cub's arguments. I appreciate your advocacy. What we would have needed, in my view, and again, I'm open to persuasion and argument and what you saw from my colleagues, but we needed specific numbers that would have said, for this month, this plant, for this month, this plant, here's the dollar amount. We're not really allowed, in my understanding, in my view, to just impose a penalty of 5 to 10%. We can't do that. It's arbitrary. It's not based on numbers. So if there had been ties to certain numbers, or if either of you have those, certainly would welcome review, but I landed in the unfortunate position that it just was a lot of actions, and none of them appeared to be imprudent based on the law that we have in Wisconsin. So that for issue 1, excuse me. Put me at alternative 1. Which is basically that the $116.8 million is, based on the record we have, the prudent and actual DABD in this case. So, Chair.
So I think you did a really good job of providing the overview, and you said a couple of things that I will respond to. The first is that you pointed out when we're talking about the prudent standard, right? So it was the concept of prudency was introduced, and it was suggested that we should sort of penalize the utility, and that we should disallow a certain amount of costs because we can't explicitly find that the increased costs related to the railroad issue was prudent. And prudency in Wisconsin is very clear, and it's also, the utility is afforded the presumption of prudence. That's a different standard than the reverse, right? So it's not that the utility has to come to us and prove that they were prudent. It's that they are afforded that presumption of prudence, and it is up to us or interveners to prove that what actions they took or didn't take were imprudent. And I think, Commissioner Hebner, you hit the nail on the head when you said that it was a series of unfortunate events. That doesn't make it easier on customers, the fact that their under collection was of such a high magnitude. I don't think that that should be minimized. I think that the company should look long and hard about ways that they can manage their costs, especially as Wisconsin Industrial Energy Group pointed out that customers are facing another increase. And there's going to come an inflection point where customers say, we can't handle this anymore. This is just too great of a magnitude, and it is occurring too frequently. And we've attempted to try to mitigate that by putting IOUs back on a schedule in terms of filing their full rate cases. But you're exactly right, Commissioner Hebner. This was a series of unfortunate events. It was occurring nationally, and as you indicated, at the company, it was being elevated appropriately. So it's not as though you had a low-level manager sitting at the desk ignoring the feedback and ignoring what you see in Exhibit 4. It was the exact opposite. Management and then senior management was involved. And it wasn't just this utility. This was occurring across the country. And in my mind, and we have somebody, I mean, Mr. Mailata sat in that role. I mean, he's about as close to the action as we have here on staff. And he went through very similar situation as he indicated in his testimony when he was with his previous employer. This is unfortunately not a novel issue. And as you indicated, the company did negotiate a very attractive contract with the rail provider. As difficult as it is, fuel costs and the fuel reconciliation cases that we have, the utility is not making money on that. They're passing these costs through to customers. And our job is to look at the prudence. And there was nothing in the record, there was nothing brought by any intervener that specifically and legally pointed to an amount that was imprudently incurred. So I'm in the same spot that you are. I'm at alternative 1.
Commissioner Strand?
I was prepared to come in here and talk about how difficult the railroads are and the prudency standard and all those things, but you both did an excellent job of discussing that and also the magnitude of the impact of what this cost will mean to ratepayers with a pending increase also coming, potentially. So I'm in the same place for the same reasons, and thank you very much for that great discussion about it.
Yeah. I'm just gonna close one more thing on the numbers, and that is, page 5 of this, the annual value obligation, and the utility put in testimony, they have corrected that. They're doing that through the railroad's portal now, and I think that they should be doing that. They should have done that. What I just didn't find, because when you look at January for Columbia, Unit 1 was authorized, in other words, expected to run at 72%, and it actually ran at 78%. So January was not a problem. For Columbia 2, expected to run at 77, ran at 79. So it wasn't that January, like you saw this, oh, there's no volume obligation, all of a sudden you see this capacity factor sink.
Right.
No, it was operating fine to start the year. It was after that clearly the capacity factors went down. Okay, so with that difficult piece out of the way, issue 2 is, should the applicant recover its 2022 deferred account balance through a class level basis or as a flat rate? I generally prefer the class level basis. When we've done this in the past, however, it's been mostly refunds, and it's been 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. We'll talk about the duration in the next issue, but suffice it to say that, nobody's proposing to do this in 1, 2, or 3 months for this case. So I can certainly live with the flat rate, given the dynamics of this multi-month, multi-year. But just as a general basis, I do prefer the class where we can do it. So curious where you both are at on that.
Yeah, I was, initially, I was intrigued by going the class-based method, and we've done that when there have been refunds. And I think that it, as Cub pointed out, it does adhere more closely to cost causation. But a surcharge of this magnitude, and assuming that we're going to authorize a longer length of recovery than we normally would, I am in favor of a flat, using the flat rate, because using class-based might lead to some unintended consequences, especially if there's a true-up, if they end up over-collecting. And I think that we would be, we could inadvertently be causing more harm than good. And so I am in favor of using the flat rate method.
Great.
I'm in favor of that as well. I think it's the relatively cleanest option in a unclean situation. So, yeah, I'm there as well.
I'm
Thank
going to
you.
join you guys at one then. Okay. So issue 3 is, what is the appropriate period for the applicant to recover its deferred account balance? And then I'm going to also raise an issue that was raised in the docket, and that's related to the sales forecast. So if we are going to approve this over 2024 and 2025, we currently do not have an authorized sales forecast for the utility. That is being developed in the rate case that's currently open. But it will be an issue in the case. It may be a contested issue in the case. I'm going to put this back on the chair. I'm fine with either a 24 or a 27-month recovery. I really am. I think there's pros and cons. I think that WIG made some very fine points about starting in January and sort of not having this late year increase for their commercial customers, which is going to be significant. You think 5% on a very large energy bill is going to be significant. So I'm fine with that if we go with January. Another part of me says we just need to get started sooner. And so I can really live with both. But I don't think I would not do anything shorter than that. I just think the rate impact would be too high to do it over 12 or 15 months, in my view. So I would do either 24 or 27.
This makes me really, I'm trying to choose my words wisely. I am not a fan of stretching out recovery over long periods of time, because it does exactly what we're staring down right now. It ends up pancaking, and the rates get plopped on top and on top and on top and on top. And for some customers, you are exacerbating an already difficult position when they're trying to keep up with their bills. That being said, because of the magnitude of this, I think that it is prudent to look at a longer period of recovery. And as much as it pains me to say it, never in a million years did I think that we would be talking about allowing recovery to go through the end of 2025. But when I look at the impact on customer bills, and again, the fact that it's going to be exacerbated by yet another request to change rates, somebody has to look out for the impact on monthly bills. And I think because of that, I am comfortable in this particular case using the 27 months. I understand Wisconsin Industrial Energy Group's position of waiting until January. I just, that is a pill that is too hard for me to swallow, and I think we need to get this started as quickly as possible in order to just try and mitigate what's coming around the corner. And it is a very unfortunate position that we are in, that we are staring at multiple increases by this particular utility, and I find it incredibly disappointing. But in order to look at that average monthly impact, I'm comfortable with alternative 4, which would utilize the 27-month period beginning in October of this year through December of 2025. And so because of that, Commissioner Strand, I'll have you opine on that, and then we can
back to
revisit the
sales.
sales
Yep.
forecast. Yeah.
Thank you. So I went back and forth between alternative 3 and alternative 4 on this, but I'm very comfortable with alternative 4. I think it's one of the only tools we have to make a bad situation slightly better for the ratepayers. And we talked to staff, and they seem comfortable with kind of pulling the trigger in October for what that means for them with staff work, which also helped me get there. And again, I think, like you said, we should kind of rip the Band-Aid off and start now so we can hopefully mitigate as it continues to go, and spread it out, because it is going to be painful for these people. So yes, I'm at alternative 4 as well with the 27th-month period. I think we should get it going when we can. Thank you.
So I'll join you there. As far as the sales forecast, a few options were laid out for us. My preference was to use the authorized sales forecasts that will be approved in the rate case. And that is the option C of our internal, of what Cindy laid out for us, what our legal counsel laid out for us, if that's okay to say that out loud.
So you're also at alternative 4, Commissioner Hebner?
Yes.
Okay.
I would do 27 months.
Okay, so what that means is we have an authorized sales forecast that's already in place for 2023.
Right.
So that'll be in place for the year 2023. And then because we have to establish what the total amount to be recovered is and how it's going to be recovered in rates, it's necessary that we figure out what the sales forecast is. And I'm not comfortable taking their forecasted amount
Right.
based on why we're here right now. And so I agree with you that we should indicate in our order that the collection rate to be used for 2024 and 2025 will be the rate that's established based upon the authorized sales in their underlying rate case, which is 6680-UR-124. And that's really important that we make it clear
Yeah.
in the order that it's going to be based on authorized, not taking the applicant's forecast.
That's where I am too.
Okay.
I'm in the exact same place for the exact same reasons. Thank you.
Okay. Are you good? Okay. Up to issue 4. This is our final issue in this docket. What is the appropriate short-term interest rate for the surcharge if recovered beyond the end of 2023? So as the chair explained very well, we have authorized rates for this utility, which include a short-term interest rate for 2023 and through 2023. This utility does not have authorized short-term interest rates for 2024 or 2025. The normal course of business is that those would be authorized during the rate case, which has begun. However, we need to provide a total amount that this this DABD, this deferred account balance debit is going to be. We need to have a total. My policy advisor and legal counsel, Elizabeth, and I read this many times, this specific provision of Admin Code 116.07 to understand that and looked, functionally at how it worked. And I came to the conclusion for myself, looking forward to your thoughts, that we need to use the short-term debt right that we have authorized. And the code says specifically that. that we need to use an authorized short-term debt rate. The utility did make the point in their legal brief that in prior times when a collection has spanned multiple years, that a different interest rate was used. However, both of the years had an approved rate. And so the nuance of this particular situation is if this had happened in the middle of a biennial rate case, we would have had a rate for the first year and the second.
Yep.
But the fact that it happened at the end of a biennial case, we have one for this year. We do not have a rate for next year or 2025. But we need to use, according to the administrative code, the authorized short-term debt rate. We only have one of those in my view, and that's the 0.45% that is represented in alternative 1.
Yep,
So
I
I'm at
agree.
alt 1.
100%, and I think, their lawyers tried to make the argument, and it's a worthy argument, but like you said, it fails to recognize the nuance that in that particular case that they brought up, it's because they had short-term debt rates that were authorized. They were different amounts for those 2 years. We have one authorized debt rate. The code is very clear that we have to use the utilities authorized short-term debt rate, and that is 0.45%. So I'm also at alternative 1.
I'm in the same place for the same reasons, and I think it's one of the silver linings to this is it's the only rate and certainty we kind of have in this situation, and so it's what we need to do under the code. Thank you.
Are you good?
Yep.
Ready? Okay, in docket 6680 FR 2022, I move that we approve the applicant's 2022 fuel reconciliation application consistent with our discussion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that moves us to agenda item 11, which is docket 3270-FR-2022. And Commissioner Hebner, you're also leading this discussion.
Yep. So we are in the same administrative code and law. This particular case is for Madison Gas and Electric for their reconciliation. The commission had approved a fuel cost plan of $82.7 million approximately, and their actual fuel costs was about $93.9 million. However, their sales also increased, and ultimately, the deferred account balance debit is about $8.74 million. We have the same essential issues in front of us. The drivers, again, higher natural gas prices than forecast, higher energy prices, electricity prices in MISO, but also the Columbia issue reared its head too. So MG&E is a minority owner at Columbia. Cub raised some points that I think are important points to look at and to understand how, if we would have found imprudence for the majority owner, what do you do about the minority owners? As we just discussed in the case of WPL, we did not find imprudence for that operator, so that necessitates that, we're not going to flow that through to MG&E. The other piece of the MG&E, and I did raise this at the hearing, is that they are co-owners of the Elm Road Generating Station in south of Milwaukee. We'll be taking that one up later, but I'll fast forward to say that, I didn't find imprudence with the operation of ERGs, and specifically ERGs 2. The unit did have challenges in the last few months of 2022, but it, based on the information that was provided, it was a short-term outage that was unplanned, but because the unit was down, they had a longer-term outage that they would have needed to take at some point anyway. So they really synergized those, got the short-term fix and the longer-term fix done, and got the unit back up and running. So I don't see any imprudence to flow through to MG&E on that count either. The balance is not obviously quite as high, but MG&E is also a much smaller utility, and so we will face again the question of how long to spread this out in order to minimize rate impacts if we choose to do that. For issue 1 is what is the appropriate level of monitor fuels and associated deferred account balance? I am at alternative 1, which is to say that I did not find any imprudence here. The same issues that we talked about in the last case affected the Columbia here, and as I mentioned with ERGs, it was a unique situation, but the outage, I did not find that it was imprudent. I think that it's actually is prudent when you have a longer-term outage you need to take to try to minimize, take care of it now so that your unit can get back up as soon as possible. So that put me at alternative 1 on this.
I agree.
Chair.
I'm in the same spot.
Okay.
I am as well. Thank you.
Okay, so issue 2 is back to the class level or the flat rate. Again, as I said before, my preference is class level. I am okay with flat rate. Chair,
Agreed.
which one do you want?
Alt 1.
What?
rate, flat
Alt
rate,
1?
yeah.
Okay.
I agree. Thank you.
Sorry, you're at Alt 1?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll join you there. Issue 3 is what period is appropriate to recover this, and we will have the sales forecast question again. The options for us, if we choose to go into 2024, I should say, the options are to do 1 month in September, 1 month in October, 3 months, October through December, start in October and go for 12 months, or start in January and go for 12 months. I was supportive of the 12-month options. I think that the rate impact for doing it over 1 month is, or even 3 months, is higher than I would like to see. And so I was supportive of either alternative 4 or alternative 5, based on the information that we have. Because the sales forecast is expected to increase next year, alternative 5 is actually a slightly lower per kilowatt hour rate that would be expected. So that's what made me interested in that. However, that would delay it till January. So I saw merit in both.
So I was leaning towards the 3-month option and just
Okay.
getting rid of it
Ah.
in 2023, recognizing that, yes, it'll be a larger impact than spreading it out over 12 months, but it's still single digit in terms of the monthly bill impact.
Right.
And so, again, I just, it's really hard for me to keep these surcharges on the books for such a long time when we know that there's a potential for an increase right around the corner. And so because of the total amount in this case and the bill impact, I was comfortable going with alternative 3, which would put the surcharge in place from October 2023 through December 2023. So I'm at alt 3.
Commissioner Strand.
Thank you. So I kind of was back and forth between alternative 4 and alternative 5. I do want to note that this applicant specifically expressed some concern about their ability to quickly turn this around with their billing system. So how fast they can implement the surcharge. But Chair Vox's comments regarding alternative 3 make a lot of sense as well, to kind of get it over with, get it off the books, and then move on with what things are going to look like in 2024. So I could go with 3 or 4 on this, Commissioner Huebner. I don't know where you would like to end up, but I'm curious to hear.
Yeah, I would be at 4.
Okay.
If there's another vote for that. I do think that spreading it out, I know it adds interest and it stacks, and I get that, but I think just trying to minimize the monthly impact, to me, makes the most sense. So I would be at alt 4.
Okay, I
if
can
you're
join you there. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. And do you want to dissent on that? Okay. So then, I think you and I need to decide on the sales forecast, and I would be in the same spot, which is to say, we would decide that in the rate case with
Yes,
an authorized.
I'm there as well. Thank you.
Okay. Good. Okay, final question on this. Issue 4 is what is the short-term interest rate to be used? The same type of issue as before. They have an authorized 1% rate. And I would do that. So I would be, at this case, is alternative 2, apply the currently authorized 2023 rate.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay. So in docket 3270 FR 2022, I move that we approve the applicant's 2022 fuel reconciliation application consistent with our discussion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now we move to agenda item 12, which is docket 6690-FR-2022. This is the fuel reconciliation for Wisconsin Public Service. Again, there is sort of that flow-through issue of Columbia, which is why we took that case up first. And for those reasons that we discussed in the prior two cases, I do not have any issues with the level of monitored fuel costs. I think that they are appropriate. And in this case, that puts me at alternative 1, which is approving their application and deferred account balance as filed.
I'm in the same spot. Here we see a different applicant that had a very high shortfall, but was able, with excess revenues, to dramatically reduce it, down to the 4.6 million. So I did not find any imprudence there, so I'm at alternative 1.
Okay?
I'm alternative 1 as well. Thank you.
All right, so now, Commissioner Hebner, does your view change to go to class because of
Right.
the amount, right?
Yes.
And I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are. So I was prepared, initially I thought class level, and then the more I thought through it, I felt more comfortable using the flat rate.
Okay. My preference is for the class level. That's the way we've been doing it for the refunds. If we collect this in 1 or a few months, I think it can stay true. So that's my preference, but
Okay.
I'm not strongly, it's like a 60% thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not
Yeah,
a
I mean, and
99%
that's
thing.
where I started.
Yeah.
And in this case, I'm again gonna advocate for keeping it in 2023.
Yeah, me too.
And so if that's the case, then I think when the recovery period is shorter, the class level basis impact can be felt more positively for the customer,
Yeah.
right? And it adheres closer
Yeah.
to cost causation versus if you're spreading it out over 24 or 27 months, then the impact and the accuracy becomes muted. So I guess that I just put myself at alternative 2, class level basis. Commissioner Strahan.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that as well, as given the amount and I think where we're going to end up on time period. So, thank you.
Okay. So then for time period, I was very firmly at alt 3, which would authorize the applicant to reconcile that balance in September of 2023 through December of 2023.
Yep, and I am good with that.
Okay.
Alternative 3.
Great. Okay, great.
In docket 6690 FR 2022, I move that we approve the applicant's 2022 fuel reconciliation application consistent with our discussion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, that brings us to our final item on today's agenda, which is docket 6630-FR-2022. This is the fuel reconciliation for Wisconsin Electric Power Company. It results in a net under-collected balance of just over $1 million. So I would accept this, and I'm at alternative 1, as I was in all the other cases.
Great. I wanted to just take a moment. I had some questions in the hearing on this, and I thought that there were some areas that weren't hadn't yet been explored around ERGs, and I want to thank the witnesses from the applicant, Mr. Tutkowski and Mr. Oswald, for being available, and I thought that they thoroughly answered the questions that I had, so I wanted to just take a note to appreciate that. The one wrinkle on this one that was raised in that hearing was that the applicant may be pursuing legal remedies for some of the equipment. And in discussion in my briefing on this, I guess I would propose that we put a deferral in to see if they are able to recover some legal remedies for this equipment. I would like that to be available to staff to look at in future rate cases. That probably would not be for years from now based on how litigation goes. So I kind of wanted to put that marker in the ground to see if there are revenues that flow back from legal victories on this, that those would be available and as a benefit to customers, right? So that was for your consideration. That was not really, obviously that was not in the record, but based on the fact that they are pursuing some legal remedies, I thought it might be prudent to do that.
So it wouldn't, but it doesn't impact the calculation of the surcharge.
Not at all.
Right.
It's just
So
putting a
in
marker in the
future.
ground that
And
3,
I
4,
think we
5 years
typically
from
do
now.
that, right? I mean, anytime
Yeah.
that there's liquidated damages or
Right.
any sort of settlement dollars, we ensure that those are looked at and that they're used to offset any
Right.
costs that the
That was
utility
my
may have in the
thinking.
future.
Yep.
Yeah, so I don't, because it doesn't impact the surcharge, I don't know that we need to do anything specific.
And I guess I just would have the question on carrying costs.
It's just unknown,
Yeah,
It's gonna
we
take
don't
years.
know.
yeah.
So I would say, don't worry about carrying costs for that at this time.
And I just would not be inclined
short
to
term.
do anything in
Okay.
this case.
Okay.
Other than internally, put
Mark it.
staff on notice and
Yep.
make sure that
Okay.
that data request gets sent out
Yeah,
when and if it becomes appropriate.
okay,
Yeah.
all right. So I'm at alt 1 for this docket.
Sorry, just to clarify, the data requests, asking them the amount of any damages.
Yep.
So we should probably, as part of the deferral, require the company to report to us so that staff knows then to issue the data requests. So grant a deferral in the event there are any damage recoveries, and will require the utility to notify the commission in the event it is in receipt of any such damages.
Yep.
Okay.
And no carrying costs.
Correct.
Is there a timeline you have to respond on?
Within 30 days, give us notice. Reasonable.
Yep.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you. Okay,
Yes, I was also at alternative one for this, and I support the getting more information about potential
yeah,
settlement or damages received. Thank you.
okay.
All right, so issue 2 is class level or flat rate, and I'll be at class level because I am going to vote to have this taken care of in 1 month. So I'm at alt 2 for issue 2.
Thanks, sorry I cut you off. I'm at alt 2 as well.
Okay.
I am as well. Thank
Okay.
you.
And then for issue 3, I'm at alt 1. I would authorize them to reconcile this in the month of September 2023.
I'm in the same spot.
Okay.
I am as well. Thank you.
Okay, in docket 6630 FR 2022, I move that we accept the audited fuel surcharge of $1 million, $1,093,796 as discussed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that concludes our official business for today. The next open meeting is scheduled for Thursday, August 17th, 2023 at 10:30 a.m.
Move we stand adjourned until Thursday, August 17th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.